Hi, my name is Rachel and you're watching the Rachelistic channel. Welcome back to my channel and to part 2 of these videos on PDA, pathological demand avoidance, not public displays of affection. So as you can see, I look different from that very first part of this video. That is because when I originally filmed this video, I did not know that I was going to do it into 2 parts. So here I am. If you haven't watched part 1 of the videos on PDA, then I will link it up here so that you can go check it out and watch that before this one so that you can fully understand what pathological demand avoidance really is. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the different types of demands, and then we'll be going into some tips and tricks to help you live your life if you have PDA. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoy it, and let's just get back to the regularly scheduled programming. Okay. So now I'm going to go into talking about the different types of demands. So when learning about PDA, it helps a lot to understand what demands are. Obviously, if you hear the word demand, you just think of someone literally being you must do this or you have to do this, but that's not always what a demand is for someone who has PDA. So there's a whole list of the different things that are demands. So the first one is direct requests or questions from others. So this is your typical idea of what a demand is. So that could be someone just telling you to do something. So someone tells you put your shoes on, or sit here and wait, or pay this bill, or they might ask you a question like, what do you want to eat? Or what do you want to drink? What do you want to do? So those are the direct demands. Yeah. And with questions, questions might not always seem like a demand, but the expectation of having to answer the question is what makes it a demand. And so then there are indirect demands. Yeah, there's a few. One of them is praise. So just, someone telling you that you did a good job on something and be wow, you're a really great painter or something. That can be an indirect demand because it can lead to anxiety of future expectations of what that person wants from you, instead of the positive reinforcement that it's supposed to have. So someone is saying all the time, oh, you're such a great painter, and now it's you feel you have to always do a good painting, and so that then it becomes a demand, right? Another indirect demand is just other people's energy. So sometimes you don't even have to say something, but just the way your energy comes off, it's you have an expectation over me. I have a good example actually. So in school, say you're working on a worksheet and your teacher is just walking around the classroom, making sure that everyone's doing their work. When they come by you and they're seeing what you're doing, now you feel you have to be working on your worksheet and being productive just because they're there, and their energy, they're just trying to look around, make sure people are doing stuff properly, but that energy is an expectation. It becomes a demand. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So another indirect demand is time. So time is typically an additional demand on top of another demand. So just having a timeline or a deadline of when to do something, it just makes it's just another demand over the thing that you already have to do. And then the last indirect demand that I have here is uncertainty. So just when things are not clear or up in the air, that can feel like a demand. So a lot of PDAers tend to have an intolerance for uncertainty. It's very uncomfortable, or anxiety inducing to like not know what is happening or what's going on. So they often feel like they need to be in control or like know what is happening, just because like the uncertainty makes them uncomfortable or anxious. So another demand is demands within demands. So that is basically like smaller implied demands within the larger demand. So an example of this is like when you are going to the movies, within that demand of like going to the movies, there's also the smaller demands of like having to sit still, having to be quiet, having to pay attention. Like these are all like smaller demands within the larger demand. And so that's another type of demand. Another demand is the like I ought to or I have to feelings of daily life. So these are like things that come from yourself, but just things that you feel like you have to do, or yeah, things that you feel like you need to do, things that you tell yourself that you need to do. So this could be like getting out of bed, drinking water, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, paying your bills, going outside, exercising. I don't know. Anything that you tell yourself that I have to do this, that is a demand. And then on top of those things that you tell yourself, there are also like internal demands that are not necessarily things that you tell yourself. So there's like your internal like bodily demands, when your body tells you that, you know, you need to eat food, you're like hungry, or like when you're thirsty, when you need to use the bathroom. Those are like your like bodily demands. But then there's also other internal demands where it is like your thoughts and like wishes. So like things that you would like to do, or things that you hope to do, or you know, those are also demands as well. And so the next one is very similar. The next demand is things that you want to do. So this could be like hobbies or hanging out with your friends or like special occasions or events and things like that. Like things that you want to do, things that you like to do can also be demands if you feel like you have to do them, or like if it's like scheduled, it can feel like a demand. Going off of that, so plans are also demands. So if you see that you have something that's coming up, your anxiety can like, the anxiety, the avoidant or feeling of resistance can like build up as that date or the time comes closer and closer. And so another type of demand is decisions. So yeah, knowing that you have to make a decision about something makes it again a demand. So decision or like option paralysis can come into play here a lot, especially if you have like a lot of different things to choose from. You can definitely, it's definitely like a setup for like decision paralysis. So yeah. Another type of demand is transitions. So there's a few things about transitions that make it a demand. One, the fact that you have to stop doing something and start doing something else, that's like a demand. It's like two demands. And then also if you have to like stop doing something and like go do something that you're not entirely sure of, then that uncertainty comes into play, and you have like the uncertainty demand on top of this transition demand. It's just a lot of demands. Another demand is expectations. So that can be expectations from others or expectations from yourself. And then the last demand is sensory overload and sensory integration difficulties. I guess it's not necessarily that having a sensory overload is a demand, but it makes like other demands more intense because you're like overloaded, and it's like you don't want to do anything because you're overloaded. So yeah, so those are all of the different types of demands. It is a lot, but it's actually very helpful with like kind of understanding yourself better, especially if you have PDA, because you can kind of see how like these different types of demands kind of play out in your life and how you may try to avoid them. Now let's move on to talking about some tips on how to deal with PDA, or just tips on how to live your life as a PDAer. So yeah, This again, it all comes from the PDA Society, so you can go and check it out for yourself if you want. That link will be in the description, okay? But yeah, so all of these tips come from people who have PDA or comes from PDAers. So the first tip is recognizing demands. So that is just like learning what a demand is. So that's kind of like that list that we just went through right now. That is the first tip is that list. So there you go. I've already helped you out with your first tip. You're welcome. Just kidding. But yeah. The second tip is recognizing avoidance. So that is, recognizing that avoidance, it can look different. It's more than just saying no to something. So like it can be things like we talked about this already, but it can be things like a distraction, excusing yourself from something, procrastination, negotiation, masking, role play, fantasy, controlling, incapacitating yourself, etc., etc. We went through this already, but yeah. The second tip is just recognizing what avoidance can look like. The third tip is identifying and understanding your PDA. So this would be like learning more about PDA and what that, and kind of like figuring out what that looks like for you, what it means for you. This video was a great first step, and the next good step would be going to that website and reading that information for yourself, really processing it, and like reflecting on your life and like being aware in like your day-to-day life of like moments when you feel like you're trying to like resist or avoid something, or something is giving you anxiety. Kind of like reflect and like, why is this giving me anxiety? What is the deal? Is this a demand? Is this something else? Yeah, so that you can really understand like basically what PDA is, I guess, for you, or if you have it. And so after that, the next tip, I guess, is self-acceptance. Now that you've learned more about yourself, it's like the next step is to like just accept yourself for who you are. Yeah, and also managing the expectations that you have of yourself, because obviously if you think you have PDA, you probably already know that you're not neurotypical. But just like managing the expectations of yourself, so like things are like more difficult for you because of PDA, and so like being able to just like have expectations of yourself that are not like far above what you can actually do. So the next tip is understanding masking. But this is a tip that is, I feel like this is just a tip for anybody who's autistic, anybody who is a masking autistic person. Understanding masking is like a great tip I have in figuring out how to live your autistic life. But in terms of PDA, masking can be used as like a coping mechanism, not a good coping mechanism, but a coping mechanism to like hide the difficulties that you're having. And so obviously, yeah, learning about masking is also learning how to unmask and actually understand your struggles with PDA, and kind of understand like how to get past that in a way that's not just masking. Basically learning better coping mechanisms other than masking. So yeah. The next tip is finding your tribe, as they say, or just finding a community of people that are going through the same things that you're going through. So that whether that be like other autistic people, other masking autistic people, other PDA profile autistic people, just connecting with others that kind of share the same experiences and difficulties as you can be very like reassuring and liberating, I guess, for yourself, to make you feel like, you're not alone. There are other people who are like you, and there are other people who are feeling and experiencing the same things that you do. So yeah, and whether that's in person or online, I don't think it matters, but yeah. The next tip is managing, reducing, and disguising your demands. This is just basically trying to figure out how you can reframe the demands, I guess, in your mind to make it easier to do things, to get on with your life. So some ways that you can do this is like keeping your daily demands to a minimum, with lots of like downtime and breaks. Can be setting things up so that you can be taken care of when you are like when you don't have the energy to do things. So that can be like meal prepping in advance, so that on days when you don't have the energy to cook, you can just grab something out of your fridge and put it in the microwave and that's it, right? Another thing you can do is like or I don't know. But another thing to keep in mind, I should say, is that when you have low anxiety or no anxiety, it's obviously a lot easier to do things. So the tip is to learn ways on how to cope with your anxiety, how to lower your anxiety so that you can do more things and you don't feel so like resistant to everything, right? Or so anxious about everything. Another thing is like tricking your mind. So some examples of that would be like distracting yourself from the task that you have to do, or like one tip that a PDA gave was like when they have an event they need to go to, they like decide that they're not going to the event so that their anxiety, like they don't have any anxiety about it, but then like right before the event they decide that they are going. They like change their mind so that they don't really have the time to like get out of it, I guess. I'm not sure how that works for them, but I don't think that would work for me. But if it might work for you, I don't know. And another like thing like of tricking your mind could be like doing something new to like change things up in your like routine or something. So like that could be like getting new bath products or having breakfast for dinner or showering at a different time, just like changing things up just a little bit so that it feels more exciting to do. The last thing here is humor, or like using like humor or like just making things fun, or like using like role play if that's something that comes naturally to you, to kind of help do like these tasks and things. So yeah, that can look like turning a task into a game, or like pretending you're on a TV show while you're doing something, or like listening to music or like making up a song while you're doing something to kind of like take your mind off of it and just, I guess, be able to do it easier. So the next tip is being aware of your triggers. So this one might take some time, but basically just learning what triggers your PDA. It really helps you to be able to understand like when you need to start using like strategies to lower your anxiety before you get to that really high point where it's like a meltdown or a shutdown happens. So yeah, learning your triggers is a good tip. So another tip is sensory regulation. So basically this is just learning how to like figuring out how to make your environment more sensory friendly for you, making your environment fit your sensory needs. I mean, I feel like this is just a tip for any autistic person in general, but yeah, it can really help with like another thing that will help lower your anxiety. So another tip is having demand-free time. So yeah, this is just, it's what it sounds like. It's just having time where there are no demands. There's nothing that you have to do. It's just free time so that you can do whatever you want to do and you don't really have to think about like, I have to do this. You just go with the flow, do what you want. Yeah. So another tip is exploring different ways of working. So basically finding a way of like working, or like a career or a job or whatever that works for you and works for with your PDA. So whether that's a traditional job or self-employment or a part-time job, or maybe not even working at all, whatever works for you, I guess. And then also into that would be like finding workplace or getting workplace accommodations that will help you in your job. So the next tip is informing others and asking for accommodations. So this is basically just, letting the people in your life know about your PDA. Yeah, letting them know can be helpful in them getting to know you better. Yeah, and this kind of goes a little bit with the last one in terms of like jobs and stuff. I don't know, not every workplace is super accommodating, but hopefully if you are at a place that is accommodating, letting them know about your PDA and kind of what accommodations work for you can be very helpful. And also letting, like, you know, just other people in your life, like, what accommodations you might need from them is also just helpful in, like, I guess, maintaining your relationships, which is the next tip: maintaining relationships. Yeah, this is a lot like the last one. I'm not really sure why it was two different tips, but yeah, just letting people that are close to you, the people that you have relationships with, so your family, your friends, maybe like significant others, but letting them know about your PDA and basically what you need from them and what you don't need from them. And then the very last tip is therapy, counseling, mindfulness, and meditation. So these are all things that can really help in just kind of understanding kind of yourself better and helping you with finding things that can help you with lowering your anxiety. Obviously, therapy and counseling all these things can feel like demands as well, but they can also be very helpful in, with like just learning how to reduce the anxiety that you have around demands. That is everything that I have to say on PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or extreme demand avoidance, whatever you want to call it. This was very interesting for me to research and learn about, because the more I learned about it, the more I was like, oh, this definitely applies to me. This is definitely what I'm experiencing. So it was very interesting, and I hope that you also found it interesting and interesting to watch. So that is it for this video. If you learned something new, if you liked the video, then please hit the like button so that it can spread to more people. If you have anything that you would like to say about PDA, or have any comments or questions or anything, then go ahead and comment them down below. It's always nice to see your guys' comments. Finally, if you just enjoy watching my videos, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I post my next video. So as always, stay Rachelistic, or whatever your name is istic, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.